Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst and I want to talk to you today about climate goals. You know, that existential crisis, that thing that all of us should be thinking about the minute we wake up in the morning to the moment we go to bed at night. But I also want to talk about why so many of us feel frustrated that these climate goals seem to be so very far off, and maybe even a way for business to kick action down the road until the seas rise up and swallow us because we failed to rise up. We have been fighting this fight for so long, it can be extremely frustrating. And let me be clear, we are not making the progress we need to be making to survive. But I want to channel a righteous frustration into focused action. And to do that, we should talk about what these goals, the goals the world has already agreed to, actually require right now. 2030, 2035, or even 2050 may seem very far off. But to achieve these goals for greenhouse gas reduction in the future, we must take actions now. No surprise there. And by we, I don't mean just you and me and our compost heaps, consumers. I mean, obviously, global business, the people who build cars and generate power and construct buildings and use natural gas. We are in the early stages of an enormous energy transition, a transition just as significant as the introduction of coal and other fossil fuels 200 years ago. Now, the goals set in the Paris Accords are not nearly good enough, but at the moment, they are the best agreement we have. And here's the important point right here. To achieve even the Paris goals, we need major actions right now. So don't think about these goals as something put off to the future. Think about the actions business, industry, and government need to take now, because they have to plan and get rolling 10 years in advance. They have to build their business plans for 2030 and 35 right now, which means they need to actually start transitioning right now. And then think about what we can do to push them right now. The people who profit off fossil fuels, or just fear that this transition will cost them money, whatever business they are in, I don't know, they will resist the transition. They have been resisting the transition, and they are trying to slow it down. They know it's coming. They're trying to slow it down. We need to create as much pressure as we can against this slow walk, as much pressure as we can to move forward quickly. Right now, the divestment movement has been so smart about this, is an important piece of this. We know that. Forcing pension funds, which cities are deeply involved in this country, and unions, of course, forcing pension funds and others to shell off investments in fossil fuel producers and in industries that refuse to stop burning fossil fuels. We have to get them to divest. Divestment is a real-world financial hit on companies that resist climate action. It increases their cost of capital, as they say on Wall Street. In other words, it makes it more expensive to be part of the problem. And that cost can be magnified with measures to encourage decarbonization. Think like tax breaks for wind and solar power and for buying an electric car. The tide is beginning to turn now in 2021. The Ford Motor Company announced that they will be producing a new electric version of their famous pickup truck, the Ford F-150. I'm sure all those F-150 drivers are excited. When the construction guys, this is what's really important though. Well, when the construction guys and country western musicians start riding around in electric pickup trucks, then the world will start to shift. Car guy, I don't know if you know that, car guy Joe Biden, riding with Biden, even went for a spin yesterday.
President,
this sucker's quick.
how's it drive?
Would
you buy one of these?
I would.
How does it feel to be behind the wheel, sir?
It feels great. I tell you what, you love the vehicle. Now, I don't remember as a stopwatch, but I think we're going 0 to 60 in about 4.3. 4.4?
Right.
4 flat?
Well, we haven't released it, President.
I should be quiet.
Mr. President, how fast were you going?
Well, okay, I'm just going to step on it. I'll come off at 80 miles an hour. We'll see what it is, okay? You ready?
Mr. President, can I ask you a quick question on Israel before you drive away?
No, you can't. Not unless you get in front of the car as I step on it. I'm only teasing. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Sir.
You ready?
Oh my God.
All right, our best test driver ever.
That was our president hawking cars and refusing to answer questions about Israel. Okay, just one topic at a time. But the business of America is business. Seriously, Ford is not building this carbon-free road warrior out of the goodness of their corporate heart, if they even have a heart. They're building it because they think that they can make money. This truck, in its carbon guzzling version, is their biggest moneymaker. Ford rakes in twice as much money selling these pickup trucks as McDonald's makes selling hamburgers. They sure don't want to give up all of that as we transition to fossil fuels. So off of fossil fuels. So they're going to find their way. Joe Biden was sitting at the wheel just there of the American economy. Steering that economy to a carbon-free future is the challenge, right? Of course, building electric vehicles is just one piece. It's a small piece, actually. It's a very small piece of this. It doesn't do much good if you charge your pickup truck by plugging it into a power grid that provides electricity generated by coal or oil or even natural gas. No, we need to decarbonize the vehicles and the power grid. And we need to clean up all the other sources of greenhouse gases, like wasteful buildings. They finally passed a bill in New York City, and steel and concrete production. And of course, jet planes and cargo ships, the number one cause of emissions coming through Los Angeles. Buildings in New York, cargo ships in Los Angeles, because the port there. This is a big job, and it will not be done in a day. And it won't be done at all if we don't start the ball rolling, keeping that pressure applied. Every step encourages other steps. The more electric pickup trucks Ford sells, the more General Motors will try to sell too. And the more electric charging stations that will be installed, and the less Fox News will complain that there are no charging stations, and suddenly the Fox News audience will start to believe in climate change. All of these things pieced together. So by all means, feel angry or frustrated, but do not give in despair. Things are starting to change, and it is only within our power, your power, to make that change faster and ultimately irreversible, focusing our frustration on that and use it to supercharge our actions. That's what this is about. We cannot forget this fight at every single angle, but divestment is a very important part of it. We have a fantastic show today. Of course, Rabb is here, and the host of the committee program, Arun Chaudhary, is here. But before that, our dear friend, Professor Harvey Kaye, expert in all things FDR and democracy. He is a professor of democracy, like actual democracy. So we're going to talk about some democracy today. I don't know what that means. I just said I would talk about democracy today. So, all right, Harvey, we're going to talk about democracy. We will be right back right after the break.
Nomi, can you hear me?
Come on, Harvey, you're a pro. You know that we've got hot mics here. All right. I guess we'll come back. How do I not have your updated bio in front of me? All right. Professor Harvey Kaye is a professor emeritus at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. He is a professor emeritus of, this is the part that I don't have written and I can never remember because there's too many titles. Democracy, what is it? Can you explain it? That's it. Democracy.
Can I explain it? Me?
Yes, please. What is your
full title, but I was trying to save letters on the Democracy and Justice Studies. I like democracy, so what the hell?
Okay, and that's what we're talking about today.
And that's what we're going to talk about.
You've authored 9,000 books. 20 something you can find online. The other they're still in his head. No? Wait, so you want to talk about democracy? And I just said, yes, let's do it. But
yeah, but I'll tell you what. You know what?
Aspect of democracy. He's like, I want to talk about air. Like, we breathe it, pizza, we eat it, democracy.
Wait a minute. Our democratic oxygen is really reduced. How's that?
Oh,
okay. I'm trying to make you louder so I can hear you better.
Would you like me to speak louder? I am Greek. I can do that. This is just a level 3 for me right now.
You sound like you're speaking properly. I don't know why I can't hear you properly. That's the problem. I mean, I can hear you, but it's not as loud.
We're going to start a segment called Tech Check with Harvey.
Yeah, you can hear me okay, right? Okay. I won't talk as much so I can hear you all the more clearly. But when I sent you that note about I want to talk about democracy, it's because I won't give everything away in this, but I'm reading Josh Hawley's The Tyranny of Big Tech to review it. Okay.
Interesting.
And I don't want to talk about Josh Hawley or his book necessarily, but the way in which he goes about this work, I was just getting angrier and angrier about the dance that he does around how to respond to that tyranny, but then brought me back to this very question. And I hope people don't mind, and I hope you don't mind, but I just want to review. I'd like to actually look back at the last 50 years. I mean, it's really amazing. The problem is I've been around longer than you've been around, and most of our listeners right now. And this isn't something that like was limited to Donald Trump. And there was a declaration of war issued back in the mid 70s, actually even before 1975, against democracy. I mean, it was as blatant as that. They actually talked about the imperative of reducing democracy. Okay.
Who's they?
So
The
that
kiddos.
included the likes of David Rockefeller, the head of the then I think it was called the Chase Manhattan Bank. Okay. The Chase Bank. It included the likes of the Trilateral Commission. And I know people immediately, maybe not our listeners, but if you go out in public and mention the Trilateral Commission, you sound like you're a conspiracy theorist, but it was no conspiracy. What
was the Trilateral Commission?
It was an organization of very leading, the foremost mainstream political and business figures from Western Europe, the United States, and Japan, who were not then currently office holders. That was the only thing. But it included Republicans and Democrats. The two most significant names, given what was to come, was the fact that it included Jimmy Carter. This was back in the early 70s. Of course, he ran for president in 75, 76. And everyone knew at the time that his primary backers were, in terms of money, was the likes of David Rockefeller himself, who actually literally organized from above this Trilateral Commission, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was his academic assistant in all of this. And they recruited all of these folks.
That's Mika Brzezinski's dad.
Yes, that is exactly
Mika Brzezinski of Joe Scarborough's now wife.
Yeah.
Sorry, just have
right.
to.
Okay, no,
I have to modernize it for folks that can connect the dots.
Yeah, that's great. And moreover,
that's like when people find out Kim Kardashian's dad was a lawyer.
By the way, and also included George H.W. Bush.
He was on it as well. Okay.
Okay, which is to say,
that's
what?
Jenna Bush's grandfather.
Yeah, the good way, right? For young people, that's right. In case they don't know any political history at all. Okay. So, but the thing to remember about this is that this was not a right-wing group. This was not the likes of the folks gather around Ronald Reagan. This is not the Christian evangelicals. It's not the Southwestern military industrial types that were called I think they were called the Cowboys versus the Yankees. That was the divide, and they used to joke about in capitalism. The Yankees were the Bushes, and the Cowboys were those folks out west who
really showed them by sending George W. down there.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, the family got smart, right? Money, oil unified a lot of these folks, probably, indeed. Okay. And there were lots of other very, very, very prominent names, and they commissioned a report, and it was called The Crisis of Democracy. And it was published in 1975 by NYU Press, New York University Press. So this was not little sort of some right-wing, little press. This was like mainstream academic university press. And in there, they were very clear. And Samuel Huntington, the very famous, renowned professor of government at Harvard University, authored the American section. And he was very clear about it, that it was imperative that that there was an excess of democracy. We had to temper it. We had to tampen down on it. I forget the words they were using.
Excess of democracy?
Excess of democracy. And they pointed specifically, they laid out.
Hang on a second. Let me just, this is like post 1972. There was an excess of democracy.
Yes, this is published in 1975. Presumably 1974 was when this all occurred.
The lesson was excess of democracy.
So, and they pointed to the culprits. They actually pointed to the culprits. It was public employee unionism. Okay. It was the rising expectations of women, people of color, and the poor.
Oh my God.
All the folks that, by the way, if you were a part of the New Left and were determined to make a historic difference beyond the 60s, the best hope we had was for some kind of broad left coalition to emerge, okay, which by the way did not, just for the record, it did not. But they were very much afraid.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, sorry. But they were really afraid of that coalition.
Okay.
So this was a call, and by the way, they added to that their antagonists and they called them the liberal media, okay, right? And
There was like no media then. There were like 3 channels. I don't even think NPR had started.
Yeah,
What was the
NPR
liberal
started
media?
right just a few years before, right? Well, that, by the way, that made it all that more easily to
Those
control.
feminists at NPR, those anti-war feminists.
You
coming
YouTubers were not even, what do they call, a glint in the eye or whatever. Okay, so now on top of that, they actually and they, by the way, threw in university students just to make up the mix. And also they had a really good term, value-oriented intellectuals. And then they
I know who those people are.
Humanities and social science professors.
Yeah.
This was all of these folks were like, if they weren't stirring the pot, you were out in the streets demanding too much, that democracy couldn't cope with all of this. So now this isn't even, as I said, the right wing. This is the mainstream establishment types, okay? And corporate executives who are helping to underwrite all of this, of course. So, okay, they basically declare war on democracy. Well, this, of course, was part of a...
I'm sorry to interrupt because I'm processing this all as we go, and I'm sure everybody else is too. So these people they were in power, but they weren't in power. I mean, you actually had a more vibrant union supported left still at this point, even post McGovern. There was still, and I'm not saying that McGovern, but it just, I don't it's not like these are neoliberals clearly, but
these are the makings of the neoliberals.
Exactly. It's the makings. So the nerve that they have to declare this and like assume power when they weren't in power then. There was some, I mean, corporations obviously are in power, but this wasn't like, you know, the Hillary Clinton and like the DLC, which had like been in power for 2-3 decades. I don't know. I'm very confused.
The biggest problem is, here's the thing to remember. First of all, the folks who did hold political office now in the 70s were not that far removed ideologically from these folks.
So give us some examples, because back then, I mean, this was the Democratic Party that functioned differently, unless you're from the South, I guess. I'm
okay. Well, here, okay. For a start, let's keep this in mind. This is really important. Mm-hmm. That the broadest version of the left was utterly fragmented. Mm-hmm. Okay, utterly fragmented, because I mean, it got to the. I mean, look, labor itself had divided over the McGovern campaign.
Right.
Okay, George Meany, by the way, Meany walked out, not as many people think, because it has something to do with race. He walked out because he just hated George McGovern. And by the way, labor had reason to hate George McGovern. Mm-hmm. McGovern had headed a commission in the late 60s that had reduced labor's power. Now, admittedly, this was to enhance the representation of people of color and women. Okay.
Right. This is the ultimate, by the way, to this day, this argument is still made in the DNC. It's comical. This is literally, it's either or. No.
Yeah. And by the way, in spite of the media representation of labor with, you know, I mean, there were clearly right wing, or at least, you know, reactionary forces inside of labor. I mean, it's always been the divide between what's called the trades, mm-hmm. carpenters, plumbers, and so on the one hand, and on the other hand, industrial unions. And you also had the emergence, of course, of all these public employee unions, right. Teachers unions and others. But even there was the divide. Think of New York City, the divide between the UFT, United Federation of Teachers, and the Black communities in New York City, who were demanding local control of schools. Mm-hmm. So this is a moment of turmoil on the broad left mm-hmm. side of the political spectrum. And then on top of that, this is also a time in which, look, the Democrats are trying to figure out how to respond to the renewed strength of the Republican Party. Okay. Now, don't forget, there's Watergate in the midst of all this. So the Nixon administration is on the rocks. Also, the question of what will the United States do in the future in the wake of the Vietnam War? All of these questions are on the agenda. And this Trilateral Commission, they were not only trying to suppress democracy, their goal wasn't just to do that. Their goal was to actually shift American public focus.
It's so funny about this. These are the same people who want to, let's bring democracy to Mideast. Let's bring democracy. I mean, this is it's like a branding exercise.
Now,
so
and wait, one more thing, because this is important. You've got emerging on the real right, this thing called the New Right. And the champion who emerges for the New Right is Ronald Reagan. And they had their own set of what used to be called single interest groups, whether it had to do with the white evangelicals who were decidedly being drawn into the Republican. And by the way, they were being drawn in not only on the grounds of school prayer, it also had to do with the fact you had all these white Christian evangelical schools that emerged in the South as a way of also getting around the integration of public schools. And then on top of that was the question of, would you tax these Christian schools? So there's that. And it's also the case that big business was torn between, do you stick with the Democrats or which, by the way, many of them learned how to do it. You go with everybody. We can take care of Democrats, Republicans, whoever's in power will have a say in what transpires. I'm simplifying. But anyway, and then there's the National Rifle Association, which is emergent in all of this. It's also there was like the anti-porn squad, the free marketeers. I mean, you had all of these different groups.
But the commission is confusing to me because who oversaw the commission?
David Rockefeller organized it. So Brzezinski took the, if you like, executive role in sort of bringing all of this to happen.
But it's not that would be like if you and I and Dorsey and Arun and Rabb decided, hey, let's go, who's the richest one here?
Which one of us has $1 billion?
Yeah, which one of us, Melinda Gates decided to fund a commission and we're on it. Okay, and then what? Like, does it have any authority? Like, we do a
but don't
commission
forget,
all day.
This was
is
also
our commission.
Yes. But wait, remember what I just said. This was also a political vehicle. Who's running? This is in 1975. Who runs for president of the United States in 1975 and wins the Democratic nomination? This is not a quiz. Who is it?
Jimmy Carter.
Right. Who?
And Mika and Brzezinski, not Mika. Now I'm doing it. Brzezinski, yeah. I mean,
it was Carter and Mondale.
Yes.
Mondale got brought in order to make it look like liberals were behind Carter too.
Right.
Now,
that's how they
and then
used to do it
who runs for who? Then think of what happens in the next 4 years. Carter is an utter disaster. He is the first neoliberal president. Ronald Reagan emerged.
I thought we said Kennedy was. We had a whole conversation about this like a year ago. Kennedy was the first neoliberal president. JFK.
Oh, well, yeah. That you have to really,
gotcha.
Only wonks would realize that.
Fact checker.
You know what? You've impressed me right now. You get an A.
I gotta go back to school and have you grade all of my assignments. Instead, it was like never shows up to class, never reads books, but always has an opinion.
You got an A for that. But think so. And then in 1980, Ronald Reagan emerges out of defeat.
Right.
In 1976, when Ford beat him for the nomination, he emerges out of defeat, and he grabs hold of, guess who? George H.W. Bush as his vice presidential nominee, right? And George H.W. Bush was a prominent member of the Trilateral Commission, which is, so the Republicans really have come together around a merger of the sort of new right and the more conservative corporate. I mean, it's all corporate elements that are being, literally recruited. So at first, business was worried a bit about Reagan. At least Yankee business was worried, not the military industrial types necessarily, the Wall Street folks. But it was all resolved and onward. And basically, the left is crushed. Labor is crushed. But here's the most important thing. So ever since the mid-70s, especially since the Reagan years, what we've seen is a serious assault on democracy. So workers' rights, labor has been smashed. various states have been turned into right to work states. My own state of Wisconsin included, Michigan nearby. Voters' rights, by the way, the battle was underway for years to turn back voters' rights from 1965 Voting Rights Act. And then in 2013, Shelby County decision, the Supreme Court literally guts the Voting Rights Act. And right now, think about what we're seeing now. Look, right now we're seeing state upon state upon state enacting these things. And third, this also included this massive social and cultural war on, and I'll say especially foremost, women's rights. And look, yesterday, the governor of Texas signed into law a Texas bill that said that you could only go to see the doctor and to secure an abortion if you're in the first 6 weeks. Most people don't even know they're pregnant in the first 6 weeks. So
we have a comment from
part of this thing. However,
yeah,
and what I really want to get at, because I said to you I wanted to lift our spirits. Okay, so that's the story. But then here's the other thing. So we Biden and the Democrats, right?
Yeah, we
elected Biden and the Democrats. Right. And why? Because the last 4 years under Trump have seen the threat to democracy has been underway for 45 to 50 years, bit by bit. Call it creeping authoritarianism or, even creeping fascism at times. Now it all came to a head in the Trump years. And then, and by the way, those who would deny what we were witnessing, you just have to say January 6th. It's pretty obvious what's going,
It's not obvious enough. They don't want to.
But here's the scary. What's occurring to me is that people somehow breathed a sigh of relief when Biden was elected, and I know that it's been already. The disappointments have only just begun. But more worrisome is the fact that those disappointments aren't just, what's failing to be enacted. It's that we're only like a hair's breadth away from the creeping authoritarianism coming back.
The fact that you have Republicans like Rick, whatever his name is, from the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson, he's the one who wrote that article the other day, saying, this is what the Democrats need to do to seize their win. It's like, okay, Rick, pay attention.
Yeah, right.
You know what they need to do, Rick? They need to not make money off these billion-dollar elections and actually do something,
and so now and then the punchline of all this, and this is what's on my mind. This has been my cause for decades, but now it's specifically my campaign, and that not my campaign for office, but it's this. And this goes back to the FDR years as the question. If the don't let the Democrats tell us, we cannot let them tell us that they're the wall defending us against Trump and the neo-fascists. If they really mean that, and by the way, people tell me on Twitter that when am I going to grow up and, I'm already 70, but when am I going to grow up and start seeing the light that you can't trust the Democrats? We have no choice right now but to do one thing. We have got to push the Democrats, not to push the Democrats to enact things, because look, they can't. Yeah. But what they can do, and if they don't do it, we are screwed, is they have somehow got to get Biden and the Democrats. This is, maybe a dream. They have got to start talking about Americans seriously, to start demanding and pushing. Forget the word resistance. Americans have got to make it clear that a rebellion is in the making. We have the Democrats can only win if they talk about the fact that literally, if we don't make it happen, you got to go back to the Bernie idea, not me, us. That's what has to happen right now.
Well, we're not going to be storming the Capitol anytime soon, because
not that kind of rebellion. What I'm talking about is that people truly do have to get mobilized and organized.
General strike.
Okay. By the way, primarying Democrats is a good idea. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay, not you, but people should not hesitate. Sorry, I know I'm talking to the converted here. I'm sorry, but I'm just.
The audience is larger than me.
Feel better as if I talk like this.
I think. Okay, so there's this other aspect of it, because there was the strategy of the 70s with this Trilateral Commission, a commission that whatever produced ideas and hooked people in.
And by the way, and promoted candidates ultimately. I mean,
Yeah.
literally.
Well, nowadays, what they would do is they'd set up an institute or a 501c4 or a PAC, and they would use that as their faculty, their way of. I mean, everything was more like nefarious back then. Like let's have a commission, and then like as they got older, they're like, wait, let's create an entity where I can make money off this commission and recruit people and buy ads and do. Come on, guys, you can't do something without taking. But of course, the Rockefellers didn't have to do that, so we could just put some money.
Well, look,
but
think of what they were afraid of. This is our key. They were all mobilizing because they were deathly afraid that the left might actually get it together. And I mean, right. And the fact is that if look, Trump, we've got to find a way. Trump has got to go in the labor movement. Okay. If the labor movement has got to become far more aggressive. They have got to figure out by way of the state, AFLs, federations, whatever, labor, and it has to reach out in a way it has never reached out before to other forces that are on the broad liberal left to create a people's version, if you like, of a trilateral commission. Forget the trilateral, a people's version of that, so that the Democrats literally have no choice. FDR used to say, make me do it. Well, sure as hell, let's make them do it. But we can't do it if it's like a lineup of people waiting to go into the Oval Office. It has to be a collective of voices. Remember, I'm doing this in the context of a half hour with you, but this is exactly what has to happen.
Well, okay, so Class Time messaged us. It's because the PMC within the trade unions and the Democratic Party is the same people being moved around various unions and agencies. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, especially today. And so, while there's labor, the perfect example is 2016 election, while teachers, overwhelmingly supported Bernie Sanders, the teachers union, of course, leadership decided to go with Hillary Clinton. You see it on this is just the structure of the unions. You have union leaders that don't come from the union. They're more, like you said, they float around from different positions. Some are lawyers, some are executives. And it's not the same, but it's like putting a McKinsey person in charge rather than, it's like putting a McKinsey person in charge of the transportation department. That's CIA
okay,
I'm talking about, just so everybody knows.
This, however much all of those things happen, that's not, we can't use that as an excuse. Labor leadership is going to turn over soon. Okay, it's going to turn over.
Meaning because they're getting old?
They're getting old. They're going to be pushed out next year, although it's been delayed to the winter or early spring. The AFL-CIO will choose new leadership. There are things taking place inside of the labor movement. There are things taking place inside of state houses around the country. But the point is, there has to be some way to. There are so many people who think there's nothing that can be done, and the most effective thing that we can do is actually to join together. And something like, if on some grand scale, and literally encourage people to join in some kind of mobilization, because right now, people may still despise Trump, but if the Republicans have their way, given the laws they're passing in states, they're going to be able to control Congress soon enough. And if that happens, then all bets are off. Then the labor movement will see a national right to work law, possibly. Okay. Roe v. Wade will be literally trashed. I mean, the Supreme Court will want to do it anyhow. The question is to what extent a Congress that can remain progressive can literally try to construct new legislation. I mean, the fact is you've just got to keep pushing on all of this stuff. Sorry.
No, you're right. I mean,
I'm losing my mind. It's
it's important for whatever remnants of labor we have left, maybe the membership of those unions. It's almost like they have to partner up separately, aside from their leadership and create these. DSA, I think, is a great extension of this. You have a lot of union membership in DSA organizing on their own in different capacities, especially especially labor forces. to put pressure, but it's not enough, and it's not happening fast enough. And I think
and I also want to let people know. I mean, people look. The media just focus so much on the Amazon warehouse in Alabama, okay, which was a terrible defeat. But the fact is, what if people heard about Maine and the nurses organizing in Maine, and they won their union? And by the way, I take great pride in telling you that was one of my students who was the organizer for the nurses in Maine. I mean, it can happen. It can be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, Jeff Bezos is a boogeyman, and there's a lot of questions about the strategy of going down to Alabama rather than, I don't know, Staten Island, where Republicans are union members. Might have been a great option to organize at that Staten Island facility.
Yeah, Nomiki, I said to you something a year ago as well, since you have a good memory about these things. It might even have been the first time we talked on air, you know what I mean? I said to you, and in the wake of the whole debacle around, what's that guy's name? Jimmy Dore. This may sound crazy, but the fact is there is this amazing network of YouTubers and podcasters across the country. And I don't know how to do it, but this becomes this media base that, and I think it's great that you've launched the committee on Monday. Okay. Congratulations to you and Arun. I mean, there's importance. I mean, I know these are, what's it? One small step for man, one giant step for humanity. Okay. I mean, these are the kind of things, and links need to be made and connections need to be made. We're either going to win it or lose it in the next 2 to 3 years. That's what it comes down to.
It doesn't help that the platforms are not only they're not boosting us like they are with the right, but they're punishing us. So we have to figure out however we're going to do it. We have to get the word out, and that's super important. Professor Harvey Kaye, thank you. You're always the best. Thank you for joining us on Thursdays. What is it, the third Thursday of the month? Is that the
although I think if you do a count, today was actually the week a little bit early, but it's a different month. It's, Memorial Day and all that. So
I'm following, Ruthie does. I don't know. What do I know?
Right.
she's in charge. She's the boss. Thank you, Harvey.
Nice, very nice. It's good to see you. We haven't talked in a while. I hope we get to talk some as well. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later. We will be right back with our amazing panel. We have Arun Chaudhary and Rabb here to talk about today's news. Hola, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I'm so honored. We have such a dignified panel today. We have the one and only Representative Chris Rabb from the 200th District of Pennsylvania, Northwest Philly. And we have the host of the committee program airing here 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern on Mondays. Very honored to have his presence. He is the former creative director for Bernie Sanders, the chief creative director, and also the first White House videographer. I was going to say correspondent, and Rabb is the author of Invisible Capital, which was his backdrop a second ago, and then it disappeared. I like natural backdrops. I feel very because people move a little bit, it gets all squiggly. Yeah. So you be you, Rabb. Unless there's something in the background you don't want to show people. You don't want to.
I'm good.
You don't want to have one of those situations. And we all have seen those Zoom videos where people are Like, there were like two Spanish politicians who were having an affair in one of them. Did you guys see that one? Was it spelled, or they were media figures? And one walks by naked. The other one's like doing a hit. They're like, I'm like.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There will be no such drama.
No, I'm not. Let me be very clear. I'm not.
Arun didn't respond to that.
Laura. His wife. Okay. Anyways, hi guys. Serious stuff in the world. Let's talk. Let's have a little bit of a conversation, because you know who gets what's happening in the world, and he doesn't always get it, but this time he did.
You're about
Ronald Rivera. Look at that. A broken clock.
Is right twice a day.
Right, maybe 5 times a day. I'll say he's got a couple of good takes. Let's show what the one and only Geraldo Rivera. I love this so much.
We have dozens of Palestinian children who have been killed in the last week with American bombs. I have no proposed solution to this conflict. I have no proposed solution. Better minds than mine. Maybe General Jack Keane can help. And floundered, frustrated by this complexity. I know this, though, Martha, and I want our audience to, the fact that the United States of America is providing Israel many of the weapons Israel is using today to kill Palestinian civilians without even demanding a ceasefire. Tlaib is right. That makes us complicit in an ongoing crime against humanity.
Katie, last thought.
Geraldo, that is such a dishonest argument to make, to accuse the Israelis and the Americans of deliberately targeting civilians when we know, we have it on video, we've known this for decades, the Hamas deliberately places military targets in schools, in media buildings, in hospitals, and when the Israelis call them to say, we're going to bomb, we're going to bomb, we are going to, so you're justifying Hamas using human shields in order to make the argument exactly as you are. And you are saying exactly what the argument Hamas makes, which is Israelis kill civilians, which is
an Israeli
F-16
going 500 miles an hour is going to kill civilians.
Hamas propaganda. You are repeating Hamas propaganda.
I am deeply experienced in that region. I am a Zionist. I am telling you how I feel.
When they go out of their way to stop civilians from being killed, Hamas purposely uses them as human shields. That is a known fact, and you are denying it.
All right, both sides
you shoot an artillery round from a cannon, from a tank, and you expect it to land only on the military version of
that's
Hamas?
one point, Geraldo, that is valid, but Katie's point's also valid in terms of burying the weaponry and defensive infrastructure in places where children will be killed if it's hit.
Like, we can't fire Geraldo, so your point's valid, Geraldo.
Oh my God, the anger
this is what I live for. That is like the most. I love this. This was amazing. Oh my God.
I'm still a bit. I'm having a hard time processing that moment.
What part in particular? I'm so giddy right now. I've watched it like 50 times.
I'm having a hard time. Yes, help me out.
What was interesting and heartening about it was that he refused the opportunity to to both sides it again and again, and kind of tried to bring the balance of power back into the conversation, which is the correct communications tactic, which is accurate, and which makes it an important point. So, here we are.
It's almost like sometimes you take the right-wing strategy and you use it for doing the right thing. He used to be a radical. I didn't know this. Like, I had no idea that Geraldo used to be a radical, like pre, like young Geraldo.
He sounds to me like somebody who has been, who has been able to take the party line on something because he didn't have to see it and is now seeing it on social, seeing the kid. He keeps coming back to planes and kids. He's seeing the results of what happens when you send planes in.
And then he says, this is my favorite line. This is the kicker. This is media training. I'm a Zionist. I was like, oh, A+. This should not be something we rate, but come on, we're creatures of the political world and the media world. What are you thinking, Rabb? You got any feelings now?
I'll be honest. I'm in the midst of a social media firestorm like I've never experienced before. I posted something in solidarity of Palestinians. Mm-hmm. I said, remove Black Lives Matter from your vocabulary if you have a problem with Palestinian Lives Matter. I said, I cannot abide by that. And I have been besieged by white evangelical Zionists and Israeli citizens who
What about
are
your Jewish constituents, though?
So that is my next question. So a lot of people are saying I'm pandering, and the irony is, if I were pandering, I would remain silent or reflexively say I stand with Israel forever, because I represent a large and active Jewish population here in Northwest Philadelphia. I have garnered a lot of support from my Jewish neighbors here. I don't know how that will pan out after this moment. I have received some public and private support from some of my anti-Zionist Jewish friends and neighbors and constituents. But there's a level of silence that concerns me. And I'm for the first time, and I say this having gone through 4 years of Trump, I've never been more concerned about my safety than now. I was someone reached out to me saying you should get a bulletproof vest.
Wow.
I've received calls from folks who are saying you need to ensure that you are safe. And these are not constituents of mine. Most of these people do not live in Pennsylvania. They do not live in Philly. A lot of them do not live in the country. The ones who do often are folks who are white supremacists, who are also, anti-Arab and pro-Zionist, right? But are anti-Jewish beyond the state of Israel, right?
They're exactly anti-Semitic. I have a question for you, Rabb. As a politician, I mean, this is very concerning because AIPAC, for instance, has put so much energy into recruiting and bringing in the next generations of elected officials. And you are in a state legislature. I'm sure you know several of your colleagues who have gone to these AIPAC conferences, received AIPAC money. I mean, there are even progressives supposed progressives who have danced around with AIPAC. Have you refused AIPAC support in the past? Have you
That's like me refusing NRA money. Like no one from the NRA, no one from AIPAC, no one from any quote unquote pro-life organization is cutting me a check. So I'm not, but
AIPAC dances around with Democrats. I'm saying it because it's so. There are progressives who've partnered up with AIPAC in the past. So you're just like so off limits that they're not going to touch you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing. I don't know, but I've never been in a position where I've had to refuse money from the
conference or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think we get all kinds of kind of emails inviting us to this, that, or the other, but it's kind of like a form letter, that sort of thing. No one's called me and said, will you do this, will you do that? That hasn't happened. I'm assuredly that will not happen now. I have, from my one post, normally I get maybe on a good post, I'll get maybe 2,000 views. I mean, I represent a small district, 63,000 people. I think I'm up to 18,000.
It's been varying. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I want to jump in though, because you are so off the limits. They don't even bother picking up the phone to call you up to tell you the conference is in town, and yet the lens by which you're perceiving this crisis through as a politician is vastly different than Nomi and I are describing. In our lives. And so I do think that that's sort of, again, a theme that we keep coming to is how is it politicians are sort of behind the public on this? And it is because there is this communications, money apparatus. It comes from different, you're getting it from evangelicals.
And punishment.
From different communities.
Yes.
And punishment when you don't.
Yes. So the punishment for me, just so you know, let me just be transparent, is there are people who are sending me private messages saying, as of now, because of your post, I'm giving $8,000 to whomever runs against you. That's fine. I mean, none of that concerns me. I'm more concerned about, my safety and the safety of my children.
Of course.
That comes first. And some of the connections that people are drawing, the first real threat was both my position on supporting Palestine and my support of LGBTQ rights and said, I'm an abomination to God.
Yes, that's a contingency of the Republican Party. Constituency. I'm losing my words, guys.
And all lives matter. That's the other thing that has probably been the most common thing. All lives matter. And I'm being lectured about the civil rights movement as a Black man. I'm being lectured about stolen land from the United States. Yeah.
The right wing has found a way to become, the far right has become the weaponry for the Zionist movement, so not every Zionist, democratic Zionist has to touch it, but then it's still, the work is still being done. On that note, what would likely shift this? If Joe Biden, instead of, tiptoeing in, actually did something a little bit more bold and calling out Netanyahu, not just having like 3 phone calls with him 3 days in a row and simultaneously sending weaponry. I mean, Arun, I found, how Facebook, for those of you on Facebook, they do these memories and they say 5 years ago today, 3 years ago today. Well, 10 years ago yesterday, Barack Obama gave a speech. Let's see if I can find this. I didn't plan for this. Sorry, guys. He gave a speech and here it is. You ready? I'm going to quote it for you. 10 years ago, May 19th, 2011, and I quoted it. Quote, "The region, Mideast, will never reach its full potential when more than half of its people are prevented from reaching their full potential." And that was President Obama at the time giving a speech on the Mideast. What happened? Arun?
I mean, what happened was rhetoric not backed up with reality in a lot of cases. And, there's a lot of blame to go around. I always tend to, the kind of limited imagination, especially the national security establishment, just sort of gives a very limited range of things. But to me, it's almost like, and actually we're talking about it on the committee show today, that there's climate denial where you say, I don't think it's real and I'm not prepared to do anything about it. And then there's climate denial where you're like, it's man-made and it's for real and it's happening, and then yet don't obey the science on what you have to do about it. And that, I think there's an analog to what you're describing here, which is we know the despair fueled by famine, increased by austerity, basically draining working families across the world of money for 40 years in sort of financial adventurism, was going to end up somewhere. And I think Barack Obama was someone who ran on being able to speak that language and call that language out, but then was not able to muster.
Let me play a real quick clip because I think this relates to this. Rashid Khalidi has he said that the U.S. is running interference for Israel while it commits war crimes. Let's play that clip.
New from the administration in the last couple of days, beyond what was initially said by the State Department last week, that Israel has the right to defend itself?
Frankly, no. This mantra of Israel has a right to self-defense is essentially a cover for Israel to continue this offensive. What I think it means is that this administration and the United States are complicit in shielding Israel from any real pressure, such as the UN Security Council was prepared to exert yesterday, and which was prevented by the stonewalling of the U.S. ambassador. I think what we're talking about has to be seen in real terms as war crimes, as one of your reporters mentioned. It's not just targeting civilians. It's indiscriminate use of violence against civilians, and it's disproportional use of violence. Israel has as a military doctrine the disproportional use of violence, of force. And I think that what the United States is doing is basically running interference for Israel as it commits war crimes. It can be argued that the indiscriminate firing of rockets into Israel is also a war crime. But to put the onus on Hamas, as this administration does, and to keep repeating this mantra of Israel has a right to defend itself, is essentially, I think, shielding Israel and providing cover for the continuation of an attack that, it seems from what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says, is going to continue perhaps indefinitely with more tragic loss of life, mainly Palestinian life. 20-1. The numbers matter. They're human beings. There's a piece with a young woman speaking from Gaza, but the numbers also matter. Over 200 Palestinians have been killed, 11 Israelis have been killed. And those are the proportions in every one of these wars. In 2014, it was even more disproportionate. Over 2,000 people were killed when Israel dropped 21 kilotons of high explosive on Gaza. Let's hope this can be stopped before that happens.
Can you imagine that being said on MSNBC 2 months ago? So something's turning, right? Something is turning. And I mean, my belief is Biden's going to have to do something. But also Biden needs to feel the pressure from state lawmakers and Democratic lawmakers who also see that it's too far. It's too far. There are many lawmakers out there right now that I have never seen speak up on Israel and Palestine ever, or maybe leaned a little bit more Zionist or whatever, and they can't ignore this. And so there has to be some sort of he's feeling the pressure from everywhere in the States right now. Journalists who are angry that the Associated Press was bombed or Al Jazeera was bombed, but let's just be real, the Associated Press, that's what they're concerned about. They're asking questions in the State Department press hearings and calling them out, saying, how do they not know? They're feeling it from every level. How long is this going to last? How long is this, I forgive the use of the word ceasefire, but ceasefire between the US and Netanyahu going to last? Because, and I don't mean US as in like US government, I mean like the US, because the people of the US are not on the same side right now, or the majority.
They're not, and here's what I worry about, and it's an emerging strain in what are seemingly disparate op-eds being written, but there's a little of, yeah, what's happening is messed up, but like it's intractable unless we kind of let them get it done. And I'm worried that, Netanyahu feels like maybe if he feels like this is his last chance to get it done, this part of the problem thinking about this as an intractable forever problem is that we also don't realize that it's a problem that the Israelis have almost solved, right? They have almost completely finished the job and actually done it. So if they don't think they have that many more bites at the apple with the American public, then they're going to try to make this bite just as big as it can. And Joe Biden might exactly be their man who can give just the minimum amount of rhetoric, but then not actually follow through on it. So I am extremely concerned about this.
Interesting. And riding the crisis, essentially, letting it play out. What do you think, Rabb? Do you think that there's ability to pressure Biden from your position, your colleagues' positions that are speaking out?
I don't know if there is sufficient leadership to do so on the state level. I have not done an evaluation of my colleagues who've spoken up on this issue. I don't know. I'm disheartened on a number of levels. Most notably, that when the advice that we're given, particularly, I'll be honest, as Black progressives in elective office, is to stay quiet. Like, you don't need this fight. It's hard enough being progressive. It's 10 times harder being Black and progressive because we have the Democratic establishment on one side and we have the duopoly, right, that exists. And it's even stronger when it comes to this issue. So then you're a Black progressive with the history of Black folk often being accused of quote unquote anti-Semitism, which is deeply offensive to me as a Black person. Just because I inhabit a Black body, I'm therefore more prone to be anti-Jewish. That eviscerates a ton of history that is deeply, deeply problematic and tied to white supremacy. So for those of us who dare to stand up and speak out, it's very lonely. Now, I chose this thing. So I'm not whining, I'm not complaining. I'm just mentioning a reality that now gives me a level of deep concern about my own safety, and also how I will be received by my fellow Democrats in the state legislature. Because assuredly, when I go back to Harrisburg on Monday, there may be a bipartisan resolution that says we stand with Israel forever. And I may be one or two, maybe 3 out of 203 representatives who will vote no. And then the cascading consequences of that for me politically, operationally, legislatively will be determined. And I had to tell my kids, I said, look, if this means if I'm not reelected, if I am, cast aside in Harrisburg, I'm okay with the decision I made to speak up in solidarity with Palestinians. I said, this requires integrity and courage in the face of extraordinary adversity, but nothing that I'm experiencing is what my Palestinian brothers and sisters are experiencing now. So it was an easy choice, as difficult as it is.
Just
Obama
so everybody
had
knows,
to struggle with this. I think we forget now. Oh, sorry. Do you want to tell the breaking news?
Yeah, the breaking news. So about 7 minutes ago, Israel and Hamas edged close to a ceasefire. Israel agrees ceasefire in conflict with Gaza militants. So that's interesting. The headline choices are always so interesting. Israel and Hamas appeared to be on the verge of a ceasefire to take effect on Friday morning after Israeli Security Cabinet voted to accept an Egyptian proposal for a truce. The Israeli government announced Thursday. A senior Hamas official based in Qatar confirmed in a telephone interview that the group had agreed to a ceasefire beginning at 2 a.m. on Friday since May 10th. Hamas, I can't even say this line because it's ridiculous. And like the fact that the New York Times says this in the first two paragraphs. Since May 10th, Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, has fired rockets into Israel. And Israel has bombed targets in Gaza. Let's say that line again. Let's just dissect that. Since May 10th, Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, has fired rockets into Israel. And Israel has bombed targets in Gaza.
There is a lot wrong. There is a lot to talk about in that sentence. And I will say, even, getting my like Euro News update, it's like just a much sort of milder, situation. It's like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announces ceasefire to halt 11-day military operation against Hamas in Gaza. Yeah, just the news. Thanks.
Just thanks so much for lobbing that one. That's what happens when you have a major operation. But Iran, guys, Iran funds Hamas. If Iran had all that money, I'm not saying that they don't, but it's like clearly not the same situation. All right, now I'm gonna get the threats. Do we want to talk about anything else, or are we good to go? Is this just a heavy? Rabb, you got to be safe. How are we feeling?
This is I normally like to talk more about policy and such, but I want to talk about the politics of this moment. As a Black person who is unapologetically progressive, which means that I often stand alone, and at great risk. And I'm not saying that I'm some kind of hero or anything like that. I do it because I feel like I have a responsibility to do it. There's a legacy, a strong, powerful legacy that I've benefited from. And my choice to run for office was to honor that legacy of all of the activists, all of those troublemakers who made society a better place to live in, bit by bit. But the ecosystem in which we operate as elected officials and candidates disproportionately hurts and marginalizes Black progressives. Those folks who are progressive and Black are less likely to run for office because we don't believe that we could be viable. And for those of us who want to be as progressive as we can, we realize the strictures and barriers that exist for us are radically higher than our white counterparts, right? Because I have been called anti-Semitic so often and so freely over the course, even before I was elected office, and it is normalized.
Yeah.
And also, if I have difficult races and I need to raise money, we don't have. First of all, only 1% of Americans give to political candidates. They say, and it's disproportionately white, and we have a wealth imbalance. Right, so the folks who have the discretionary income are less likely to look like me, and I represent a 70% Black district. And if there's not the media literacy and the political literacy to contextualize why these minor league races are important, because a lot of folks say to me, I like what you're doing and all, but don't talk to me unless you're running for Congress or Senate or president or governor or mayor, as though state legislatures don't matter. And I remind people, guess what? Our ancestors were whether they were human or chattel based on what state they were born in.
Right.
State legislatures matter, and we know the Republican dominance is because they understood that state legislatures and local races mattered. And I'm in a state now where we just lost 2 ballot initiatives on Tuesday that strip our governor of emergency authority. So if there's another pandemic, it goes to the legislature. The governor has lost his executive power in that regard. Fortunately, the most progressive district attorney in the nation was reelected by a large amount of votes. And that is encouraging. But all of this has to be discussed kind of transparently, because otherwise we may get the balance between Democrat and Republican may be better, but that's not the same as political ideology. There's not a direct correlation between Democrats and progressivism.
Of course, yeah. Arun?
I mean, I agree. And I also just think that tax that Rabb is talking about on African Americans vis-a-vis the Jewish community is real. And what I was saying before was even Obama, sort of before we've recast him as being the kind of perfect model, he had the same problem. I bet he's anti-Semitic. He seems a little too friendly with Farrakhan. And
right, the Farrakhan stuff, of course,
campaign,
yeah.
I think including in your district, was a sort of apology tour of synagogues across America. We went to a beautiful one in Philadelphia. I think it was in Northwest, but I'm not sure. But this sort of assumption, and I just want to be sort of historically clear why this happened, because people were worried that the Jews and the blacks together, that folks exactly like us, were going to cause the communism. and this was the problem, and these two people had to be divided and separated. And man, did J. Edgar Hoover and his team do a good job, because here we are today, just dealing with just regular democratic problems for an elected representative based on this crap.
Yep.
Just makes me mad.
Well said.
Well said. All right, guys. Really, really grateful that you came on today. I know we had a lot to talk about, but this is such a big topic, and I'm really grateful that Rabb, you're safe, and stay safe, and be careful. I hope you have cameras set up everywhere. When I was getting threats, I mean, it's not quite the same, but lots of cameras outside of my apartment, the windows, sensors. I could give you all the tricks if you want, if you need it. Being a woman in the media is you unfortunately have to woman yourself with all that stuff, but you should know too. So make sure to stay safe, keep your kids safe. Arun, you're in Berlin, be cool. Go check out Arun's show, the committee program, right here
Monday,
on the Twitches and on the YouTubes. And what's your fans.fm and Patreon? You've got all these things?
Fans.fm/committee and patreon.com/committee program. We'd love to have you sign up for any of our tiers.
And the social, which is all in the information section as well. All right.
Yeah, you'll see all that.
Thank you, guys. We will see you next week. Always appreciate you. Be safe, okay?
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thanks for being here. All right, we have some shout outs. What do we have in here? Quasi Spec says, good on Rep Rabb. That really does speak to the political reality of the issue and how out of whack our group understanding of the situation is. Kyler Asado did ask, which you addressed, please ask Rep Rabb about the previous Philly DA race and the upcoming congressional primaries. Do we have any more shout outs, Dorsey, or I just see a line?
Yeah, give me just a second.
Oh, sorry. I didn't give the alert. I usually say we're wrapping, but I was like, I don't know if we have time for a whole other topic now. So guys, that's life. Let's just rolling with it. I'm going to continue reading this report because I'm actually just curious. So New York Times continues saying that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office cautioned that the reality on the ground will determine the continuation of the campaign. Okay, it's a campaign. Sirens surrounded in Israeli towns bordering the Gaza Strip in the minutes after the Israeli announcement, indicating the militants were continuing to fight rockets. Very interesting. All right, here's some more shout outs. Oh, Kenzo is class time. That makes sense. We love Kenzo. Kenzo's the best. Kenzo's got to come back on soon. I'm going on his show, I think. Sunday? What day is it on? I think I'm going on, is it Sunday or am I complete? Yeah, it's Sunday. Sunday I'll be on. I don't know when, if it airs live though, but I'll be check us out. I'll be on Sunday. Mila Resin says, as a Jew, Rep Rabb, I thank you. Oh, I wish you stayed around to see this. For speaking out in support of our Palestinian sisters and brothers. Sorry, but not surprised by the invective and threats to your face. Stay strong, stay safe. Ken M sends his love. Thank you, Ken. Kyler Asado again says, I'm actually helping to write climate curriculum for the Sierra Club LA and wanted to spread across the country. Something really simple is encouraging that divestment that BlackRock banks and universities to do, expand that to the federal government subsidies to invest in green. Great work. Keep it up. Rayleigh, the three wise men of the Nomiki show today. I love that. I know I said last week we need more women and less dudes on progressive left shows last week, but these three dudes are the creme de la creme of dudes. I agree. Listen, if we're going to go dude, we're going to go creme de la creme of dudes. Ian Kinsel says, glad to see US media finally sort of catching up regarding Palestine. When I was in college, I was struck by how even the Israeli press does less whitewashing. Interesting. Shout out to everyone in those live chats. Huge thank you to all of our moderators on YouTube and Twitch. Lots of trolls on YouTube today. I don't know. Was there something in the water? Are they bored? What, are there days that they come out? But we all love you. Left is best. You're the best. Thanks for being in there. Thanks for working the algorithms. Thanks for moderating. And we will see you tomorrow for Femme Friday, right here, 3 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube and Twitch. And of course, join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We will see you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system. Unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.